He doesn't miss you because you texted him every day. He doesn't miss you because you were always there. He misses you when something inside him begins to echo in your absence. This is not romance, it's psychology. And if you want to understand the invisible string that pulls a man's mind back to you, again and again, even in silence, you need to look beneath the surface, into the underworld of the psyche, where Carl Jung spent most of his life exploring the mechanics of longing. There's a paradox that people rarely admit. The more available you are, the less you're seen. The more you prove your love, the more it becomes background noise. You don't become unforgettable by presence. You become unforgettable by absence that whispers something unresolved. Why? Because the human mind does not crave what it understands. It craves what it cannot fully grasp. Now pause. Think. What if the very things you've been taught about connection, consistency, loyalty, emotional openness are not what create desire, but what kill it? What if true longing is born not from closeness, but from mystery, not from validation, but from the silent mirror you hold to his inner world? Carl Jung would call this the work of the Anima, the feminine image that lives within every man, shaped by shadow and dream, fantasy and fear. And when you unknowingly step into that image, when you mirror back to him the mystery he cannot name but deeply feels, you don't just occupy his mind, you haunt it. Here's the unsettling truth. We don't fall for people. We fall for our own unconscious projected onto them. So when you disappear, not in cruelty, but in sacred withdrawal, something primal wakes up in him. Not just the fear of loss, not just the ego's sting, but something deeper. The disturbance of being reminded of a part of himself he can't control. The part that sees you and doesn't know why he can't stop seeing you. And here's the trap no one talks about. When you chase, when you try to prove your worth, you erase that projection. You replace the mystery with predictability. You kill the very illusion that made him desire you in the first place. But let's go deeper. What if the way to make him miss you isn't about tactics or manipulation at all, but about embodying the archetype that speaks to his soul, not his ego? The difference is subtle, but everything. Because when you become a living symbol, when your presence awakens his anima, and your absence confronts his shadow, you become not a woman in his life, but a force in his mind, a paradox he cannot solve, a memory he can't bury. Have you ever wondered why some people stay with us long after they've left? Why some faces linger in dreams? Why a song or scent pulls us back to a moment that never fully closed? It's because the story wasn't finished, and the psyche doesn't let go of unfinished stories. This is the core of the psychological trick. Not manipulation, not seduction, but disruption. You disrupt the internal narrative he's used to. You create a space where he must meet himself, through the absence of you. And in that space, longing is born. Not the shallow kind that fades with distraction, but the kind that gnaws at the edges of his awareness, whispering, "She saw something in me I didn't even know was there." But this isn't just about him. Ask yourself, why do you want him to miss you? Is it to validate your worth? Or is it because you're afraid of being forgotten? Because the paradox of all paradoxes is this: the moment you stop needing to be missed is the moment you become unforgettable. When your life is so full, so inwardly vibrant, that your absence is not a punishment, but a sacred silence. He feels it not as loss, but as a summons to grow, to confront, to remember. And so I'll ask you again, not as a romantic, but as a mirror to your own desire. What is it you truly want him to miss? Your presence, or the part of him only you awakened? Leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe makes someone unforgettable? Now let's go deeper. Let's decode this psychological force. What is this invisible mechanism that pulls people back? What exactly is this Jungian trick? And how can it change the way you show up? Not just in love, but in every relationship you'll ever have? You've felt it before. The ghost of someone long gone, still pulling at your attention. Not because they said something profound, not because they did something extraordinary, but because they left something incomplete. A psychological thread dangling in your unconscious. This is the trick. And it's not manipulation. It's alignment with the deep, irrational architecture of the human psyche. Carl Jung didn't give us dating advice, but he did uncover something far more powerful. The blueprint of human desire. The anima, the shadow, the persona. These are not abstract ideas. They are forces, archetypes that live inside us, shaping how we connect, detach, and long for others. Here's the psychological trick. You become unforgettable, not when you prove your love, but when you mirror his inner feminine, his anima, while maintaining your own autonomy. It works like this. Inside every man is a buried image of the feminine, formed from childhood impressions, cultural ideals, suppressed emotions, and dreams. This is not the real woman. This is the idea of woman, the anima. She is wild, intuitive, mysterious, nurturing, dangerous. She represents not what he thinks he wants, but what his soul secretly longs for. When you step into this image, not by pretending, but by being, you awaken that unconscious force. He doesn't fall for you as a person, at least not at first. He falls for the parts of himself that you unknowingly reflect back. His ideal, his longing, his forgotten softness. And when you withdraw, gracefully, not out of bitterness but sacred, self-containment, you trigger the gap between fantasy and reality. This is where the ache is born, not from rejection, but from reflection. Because in your absence, he is left alone with his own anima. And she doesn't speak logically. She haunts. She questions. She reminds. You didn't just leave his life. You left a symbolic echo. And this is the key. It's not about your presence. It's about the internal imprint you leave behind. Most people try to be remembered by being louder, more constant, more giving. But true imprinting happens in silence. The mind returns obsessively to what it cannot resolve. And that's the real game. But there's a dark side, a consequence we rarely see. This dynamic, when misunderstood, creates obsession, codependency, and emotional confusion. Because it's not love that he feels. It's projection. He's not missing you. He's missing the part of himself you helped him touch. This is where the trick becomes dangerous. If you don't understand it, you can trap yourself in a cycle of validation, trying to be his anima permanently, losing your center, morphing yourself into his emotional drug. You become addicted to being missed. He becomes addicted to longing. No one meets the other. You both fall in love with shadows. Jung called this enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. What begins as fascination becomes fear. What begins as attraction becomes resentment. Because eventually, the unconscious demands wholeness, not projection. Here's the deeper problem. Society teaches men to suppress emotion, intuition, vulnerability, the very qualities embodied by the anima. So when you show up fully in those traits, you don't just attract him, you disrupt him. You force him to confront everything he's buried. And this confrontation feels like missing you. But really, it's his own soul knocking from the inside. Let's break it down further. Cognitive science calls this the Zeigarnik effect. The mind holds on to incomplete experiences more than complete ones. This is why cliffhangers work, why unsent messages linger, why someone who left without closure stays longer in our psyche than someone who gave us full explanation. Your presence gave him a feeling, your absence took it away, but it never closed the loop. That's why he keeps coming back, mentally, emotionally, even physically. You can use this consciously. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop proving your worth, when you stop being so accessible, you create a rupture in his pattern, a vacuum, a space where his own anima begins to wake up and ask, what did she awaken in me? But remember, this is not about becoming cold or manipulative. It's about becoming whole. To do this well, you must first know your own archetype. Who are you when you're not performing? Who are you when you're not chasing? Do you embody your own depth, your own silence, your own mystery? Because if you don't, then no projection will last. He'll see through the illusion. Or worse, you'll lose yourself inside the illusion you're trying to sustain. The trick is powerful, but it is not a shortcut. It is a call to inner work, to embody the anima in yourself, your intuition, your creative fire, your depth, and from that space, to create distance not out of punishment, but out of respect, for yourself and for his process. The consequences of using this trick unconsciously are severe. You'll awaken things in him that neither of you are ready to hold. You'll start fires you cannot tend. You'll confuse emotional chaos for emotional connection. So use this with care, not to make him miss you, but to mirror what he has forgotten in himself, and in doing so, become unforgettable. Not as a role you played, but as a door he didn't even know was inside him. Now we reach a threshold. You've learned the mechanics. You've seen the unseen. But what do you do with this knowledge? How do you reclaim your power, not just to be missed, but to stop needing to be missed at all? How do you become the breaker of projections, the one who turns longing into awakening? That's where we go next. The rebellion. The shift that ends the game entirely. You've played the role. You've been the mirror. You've awakened the longing. Now what? Do you keep circling the same psychological game, enticing with your absence, stirring his unconscious, hoping he'll come back with something real? Or do you dare to walk off the stage entirely and rewrite the script that keeps both of you bound? This is the rebellion, and it begins the moment you realize you were never meant to be missed like a memory. You were meant to be met like a force. Everything up until now, the anima, the projection, the haunting absence, was merely a reflection of his psyche, trying to find itself through you. But now you ask a different question. What if I no longer need to be his reflection at all? It sounds radical because it is. Carl Jung taught that the greatest act of love is not to complete another person, but to confront them with the parts of themselves they fear. That is what the anima does in myth. She seduces, yes, but ultimately she destroys illusions. She lures the hero inward, not to bind him but to wake him up. So let's make something clear. You don't make him miss you just to feel powerful. You disrupt his identity so he must meet himself. But rebellion means you don't stop at being a trigger. You become the transformer. This is where the psychological seduction ends, and the spiritual initiation begins. It starts with a mindset shift so deep, it feels like betrayal to everything you've been taught about relationships. You do not exist to be desired. You exist to be real, to be whole, to no longer perform the dance of being missable, to no longer withhold a strategy, or give as strategy, but to move from your own internal fire. Because if you're honest, most of your romantic pain didn't come from being rejected. It came from shrinking, from contorting yourself to fit his fantasy, from waiting for him to miss you instead of claiming a life so full that no man's attention could define your worth. So here's the rebellion. You stop trying to be the Anima in his dream and become the woman who wakes herself up. You begin by asking dangerous questions. What if I stopped performing emotional availability as currency? What if I allowed myself to be fully seen, not as a symbol but as a soul? What if I could hold space for my own inner masculine and feminine, instead of trying to balance his? Because here's the truth no one tells you. The moment you integrate your own anime and animus, the moment you become whole within, you stop being a projection for others. You start attracting people who are not looking for mirrors, but for equals. And yes, this means fewer men may chase you, but the ones who do will see you, not as an echo of their unfinished business, but as a force they respect. Let's go deeper. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, outside the masks and the shadows. It's the death of the role, and it is terrifying. Because when you stop trying to be unforgettable, you risk being forgotten. But that risk is your liberation. When you live from your center, not your need to be needed, you stop bending time around his absence. You stop waiting for the text. You stop making your aliveness conditional on whether or not he notices it. You become sovereign. The rebellion is not loud, it's quiet. It's walking away without a scene. It's choosing solitude over emotional crumbs. It's letting go of being the one that got away, and instead becoming the one who got free. Free from performing, free from projecting, free from needing to be missed. Because ultimately, the deepest love is not about being remembered. It's about being real. And when you show up from that place, not as a shadow, not as a symbol, but as a sovereign self, you don't need him to miss you. You are already whole. But here's the paradox. That's when he does miss you. Not because you manipulated him, not because you vanished at the right moment, but because, in a world of masks and games, your authenticity was rare. You didn't echo his fantasy. You confronted it, and he may not even understand why. But something in him remembers you, not as an illusion, but as a mirror that shattered and showed him his own face. That is what haunts the soul. And maybe he'll come back. Maybe he won't. But by then, you won't be waiting. You'll be living. Because the rebellion is not about being missed. It's about not needing to be. And in that freedom, you don't become unforgettable by accident. You become unforgettable by truth. Leave a comment if this cracked something open inside you. And please don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Was it ever really about him? Or was it always about waking up to yourself?